Everybody, get ready, because today we are diving headfirst into the world of AI, artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And, I know AI, everyone's talking about it, it's a buzzword, but what does it actually mean? What's
Hmm.
it all about, and why should you even care?
Right.
Well, that's what we're here to kind of unpack today. And we're going to be using excerpts from a Stanford computer science lecture to help guide us along the way.
Yeah, it's really fascinating stuff. AI can definitely feel like this big mysterious force,
Oh.
But I think by the end of this deep dive, you'll have a much clearer picture of what it is, how it works, all that good stuff.
Yeah, and hopefully it won't seem so intimidating by the time we're done with this.
Exactly.
So, to kick things off, I'm curious, when you hear artificial intelligence, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Are we talking spaceships? Are we talking robots taking over the world?
I mean, those are the classic images, right?
Right.
But you know what's so fascinating is that AI is already here. Like it's already woven itself into our everyday lives. I mean, think about it. You probably interact with AI on a daily basis and you don't even realize it.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's already here. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's rewind a bit. The Stanford lecture notes lay out a really cool timeline of AI. And it starts way back in 1951 with, get this, the first AI program.
1951. I mean, to put that in perspective, that's before color TV was even a thing.
Right.
Crazy.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So what did this very first AI program actually do? I mean, was it like writing poetry or something?
Not quite poetry.
Okay.
But it did do something pretty revolutionary for the time. It actually learned to play checkers.
Checkers. Okay, well, maybe not as glamorous as I was imagining, but
It's a start.
yeah, I mean, the fact that it could learn a game at all back in the early 50s, that's still pretty impressive.
It really is. It was a major, major breakthrough. And then fast forward to 1997, we have Deep Blue, which was that chess-playing computer developed by IBM.
Right?
And get this, it beat Garry Kasparov,
Yeah.
who was the reigning world chess champion at the time.
Now that, I have to say, that I remember, that was a really big deal. Like, machines were finally, catching up to us humans.
Yeah, it was a pivotal moment because it showed just how much potential AI had to solve incredibly complex problems. I mean, problems that at the time were considered to be, only solvable by human intelligence. And
Right.
and it wasn't just about chess. Deep Blue really showed the world that AI could revolutionize like any field that involved strategy, planning, decision making.
That's a really good point.
Mm.
Because it wasn't just a computer playing a game. It was, like you said, it was kind of a sign of things to come.
Totally.
Speaking of which, after Deep Blue came IBM Watson, right? I mean, that whole Jeopardy thing was pretty amazing to watch.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Watson's victory on Jeopardy back in 2011, that was another major milestone. It showed that AI could process and understand natural language,
Yeah.
which was huge, a huge leap forward for AI.
Wow.
And then just a few years later, 2016, AlphaGo, which was created by DeepMind, defeated a professional Go player.
Now, Go is supposed to be way more complicated than chess.
Right.
Right. So
It's way more.
That's a pretty big deal.
It was a monumental achievement. Like,
Mm.
Go has an astronomical number of possible moves, far exceeding, even the number of atoms in the universe. It's crazy.
Oh, wow.
So the fact that AlphaGo could not only master the game, but then go on to defeat a professional player, that just demonstrated how powerful AI had become.
Yeah, it's really incredible to see how far it's come from the 50s,
Mhm.
checkers to chess to Go, all in just a few decades. It feels like we're kind of living in the future a little bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, how does it actually work? What's going on under the hood of these AI systems that allows them to actually learn and adapt like that?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. The key is a powerful technology called artificial neural networks, or ANNs.
Neural networks. See, that sounds like something straight out of a science fiction movie.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But the inspiration for these ANNs actually comes from the most complex information processing system we know of, the human brain.
Interesting. So we're talking about taking inspiration from the human brain to build these artificial neural networks.
Mhm.
But even scientists will tell you the human brain is still this incredible mystery.
It really is. I mean, think of it this way. ANNs are inspired by the brain, but they're not trying to perfectly replicate it.
Okay.
It's more about taking the core principles and kind of translating them into something that a computer can understand.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So how does that actually work? How do you go from a brain cell to lines of code?
Yeah. So let's picture imagine a single neuron in your brain just for a second. And our Stanford source actually provides a helpful diagram here. But picture it like this. Each neuron has these branch-like arms called dendrites,
Okay.
and their job is to receive signals, so think of them like tiny messages,
Okay.
from other neurons.
So the dendrites are like the kind of like the inbox of the neuron in a
Oh,
way.
that's a great way to put it.
Okay.
Yeah. So all those messages that the dendrites collect, they get sent to the soma,
The soma.
or the cell body, which is kind of like the neuron's like control center.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what happens at the control center?
This is where things get really interesting. So the soma takes all those incoming signals from the dendrites and adds them up.
Okay.
And if that sum, so that total input, is strong enough, like it crosses a certain threshold, the neuron fires.
What do you mean fires?
It sends off its own signal.
Oh.
Yeah, sends its own message down a long fiber-like cable called the axon.
So the axon's like the outbox then,
Exactly.
sending that signal onto other neurons.
Exactly.
Man, wow.
Yeah, so it's like this chain reaction
Okay.
with neurons sending these messages to each other, creating this intricate web of communication. It's really amazing.
It is amazing. And to think that's happening in our brains right now is just like mind-blowing. But okay, so how do we go from that to something that a computer can understand?
That's where the magic of these artificial neural networks come in.
Okay.
So they take this basic structure of a neuron, the dendrites, the soma, the axon, and they recreate it using code.
Okay, so instead of actual biological parts, we have lines of code that act like those parts.
Precisely.
Okay.
So instead of dendrites receiving signals, we have inputs in an ANN. And these inputs can be anything: numbers, text, images, you name it.
Wow, okay.
And then instead of those biological synapses, which are the connections between neurons,
Right.
ANNs use something called weights.
Weights, like how much something weighs on a scale.
Yeah, it's a similar idea.
Okay.
Think of weights in an ANN as like little knobs or dials that control how much influence each input has on the neuron's decision.
Oh, okay.
So some inputs might have a really strong influence, and those would have higher weights, while others might have a weaker influence, lower weights.
Okay, so it's like saying some inputs matter more than others in terms of how the neuron decides what to do.
You got it.
Okay.
And just like in the brain, where those connections between neurons can strengthen or weaken over time, those weights in an ANN, they can also be adjusted. That's how the network learns.
Okay, so this is all starting to make sense, but I'm still a little fuzzy on how adjusting those weights actually makes the network learn. Like, it just still feels kind of abstract to me.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So we've got these artificial neurons with their inputs and weights and everything. But the real magic, like you said, it happens during training.
Right.
Remember we were talking about like feeding the network tons of data?
Right, like showing a dog a million pictures of a cat and being like, cat.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's all about that repetition and reinforcement. So we flood the network with all this training data, and every time it makes a prediction, we compare it to the actual answer.
So if it sees a picture of a cat and says dog, that's like, no bueno.
Big time no. Yeah, that difference between its prediction and the right answer, that's what we call the error.
Okay.
And the network uses that error to learn, so it goes back and it tweaks those weights, those little knobs we were talking about, just trying to get closer and closer to the right answer the next time.
So it's like, it makes a mistake, it learns from it, and it tries to do better next time. Just like us.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, it's exactly like that. That process is called backpropagation.
Backpropagation, okay.
And that's really at the heart of how these neural networks learn. Think of it like learning to ride a bike. At first, you're wobbly, you might fall off a few times, but each time you adjust your balance, you adjust your steering, and you get a little bit better, right?
Right.
Until eventually you're riding like a pro.
That's a really helpful way to visualize it, I have to say. So instead of falling off the bike, the network is adjusting its weights to make fewer and fewer errors as it goes.
Exactly. And as it processes more and more data, those weights, they just become more and more fine-tuned.
Right.
And the network just gets better and better at making accurate predictions. And the really cool part is it can even make predictions on things that it's never even seen before.
That's amazing. So we've covered a lot of ground here, how these networks are inspired by the brain, that whole input-weight relationship thing, the backpropagation, the learning process. It feels like we've really kind of like demystified AI a little bit, don't you think?
I think so. We've definitely laid like a really strong foundation.
Right.
And while the real world applications of this stuff can get really complex, those core concepts, they're always there.
Speaking of real world applications, our Stanford lecture notes actually give us a little peek at some actual Python code that brings all of this to life.
Yeah.
Now, I know some of you might be thinking, code, all right, that's where I tap out.
Yeah.
But trust me, it's just a little taste, okay?
Yeah.
Just to show how this stuff actually works in practice.
Yeah, they keep it super simple. I mean, the example they give is just like 10 lines of Python code.
10 lines.
Yeah, to create a very, very basic neural network. It's so basic, in fact, that it only has one neuron.
One neuron. Can you even do anything with one neuron that's like one brain cell?
I know, right? But surprisingly, you can. Even this one neuron network can learn. They train it to predict a pattern just based on 3 inputs. So imagine like you're showing it flashcards and it's trying to guess the next number in the sequence or something.
Okay, so kind of like a very simple pattern recognition.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, and it learns how to do that.
Interesting. And this simple example is built using a tool called PyTorch, right?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've had that name thrown around in the AI world.
Yeah, PyTorch it's like super powerful tool for building these neural networks. And the Stanford lecture, they actually talk about using it to create an image classifier, which is kind of like our little one neuron example, but on like a much, much larger scale, obviously.
Right. So image classifiers, those are the things that can like tell if a picture is a cat or a dog. Like that, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And while the code for an image classifier, I mean, it's definitely more complicated, the basic principles are the same. It's all about training that network to recognize patterns using those weighted connections and that backpropagation we talked about.
It's really incredible to think about, from a single neuron learning a simple pattern to these really complex systems that can analyze images and everything in between. It's amazing how AI is already impacting our lives,
Yeah.
even in ways we probably don't even realize.
It really is.
Yeah.
And, like, as AI technology just continues to evolve, I mean, at this pace, it's mind-blowing. But its influence is only going to grow.
That is definitely for sure. And that's why we wanted to bring you this deep dive today. We wanted to kind of equip you with a fundamental understanding of what AI is, how it learns, why it matters. Because whether you're, a tech whiz or just AI curious, this stuff is shaping our world.
Yeah.
It's the future, and understanding it is, like, more important now than ever.
100%. It's not some far-off concept anymore. It's here. It's now.
It's now.
And the more you understand how it works, the better equipped you'll be to navigate all the exciting possibilities and, let's be real, potential challenges that come along with it.
That's a really great point. And on that note, we'll leave you with this final thought. As AI becomes even more and more sophisticated, it's going to continue to pop up in more and more aspects of our lives. From, little things, the way we work, the way we connect with each other. I mean, everything. So take a moment, think about it. How do you see AI playing a role in your world in the years to come? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the incredible world of AI. It's been fun.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.